Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Velodyne Lidar Live. This is our 9th episode, actually, and this is where we talk to experts from every area of mobility industry. We'll be discussing the latest advancements in autonomous technology and all the ways that it's transforming our lives and our communities in real time. I like to call it the transformation of transportation. I'm Charlie Vogelheim. I'll be your host for the next 45 minutes or so. Had the good pleasure of working with Velodyne over many different episodes, and also prior to that, Velodyne's World Safety Summit. We're going to talk about that at the end of the conversation. The next 45 minutes or so, I'll be with Mary in the background. She's handling our slides and video, and be talking to Natasha Thomas. She's a Northern California Regional Executive Director of MADD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Let's take a quick look at the agenda, what we'll be talking about today. We'll get an introduction and background about MADD and Natasha, some of their initiatives and successes. We'll talk a little bit about the role of the autonomous vehicle technologies, and including LiDAR, of course, as Velodyne is an important part of all of that, and moving towards the goal of zero. We'll talk about public support and moving forward. Conversation will last about 35 minutes, and I'll save the last few minutes for Q&A. So be sure and click the Q&A portion if you're watching this live, and try to get to all your questions. If we don't get to your question, or you're not watching it live, you'll get information at the end of the presentation how to contact us directly. And as always, we will be recording the episode, so that means any and all can see it later on, and be sure and share it if it's something that you enjoyed. So without further ado, let's bring in Natasha Thomas, and welcome to Velodyne Lidar Live, Natasha. And let's talk a little bit about MADD. How are you?
Thank you so much, you guys, for having me. Thank you, Charlie, for hosting this amazing event. And once again, thank you, Velodyne.
Well, as I mentioned, let's talk a little bit about the background. Let's begin with you, Natasha, your background in getting involved with MADD.
Absolutely. MADD has been around for quite some time, and we had a great volunteer base of volunteers here in the Bay Area, and they raised a substantial amount of money to open our doors here in the Bay Area in 2008. I had the pleasure of moving from Southern California to Northern California, and wanting to get into the field of traffic safety, really giving back to our community. I was able to obtain employment with MADD almost 12 years ago as of this December. And so I've rode the wave and been with MADD here in the Bay Area since the inception of a formal office, and have been really, and have moved my way up to where I am now, the executive director. As starting out as a program coordinator, and really just serving the community and educating them on the dangers of this 100% preventable crime. And I must say, the work that I've done here, and the reason why it's been so important to me, not just professionally, but personally, because of all the amazing families that I've met, unfortunately, who have been impacted, but to see their strength and to see them move forward and really try to rectify this 100% preventable crime on our roadways has been really inspirational and impactful to me. And so I want to continue to work in their honor and be a voice for their loved ones who are no longer here.
Well, it's a deep and disturbing, issue that you're dealing with. Let me lighten it up by just saying welcome to Northern California, because I, as many of the Velodyne team, although they're located worldwide, are located at the headquarters here in Northern California. And let's go back to MADD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and talk a little bit about the history and how it started and how they're doing.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, when you talk about MADD, you cannot talk about it without paying homage to the founder, Candy Lightner, who founded Mothers Against Drunk Driving in 1980 in Northern California, in Sacramento. And she turned her adversity into advocacy after the death of her daughter, so tragic and so unfortunate, at the hands of an impaired driver. And she turned her pain into action and founded this amazing life-saving organization. And since the inception of what Candy Lightner has started, MADD has done tremendous work, not just within the organization, but really changing the scope of how our nation thinks of impaired driving, getting them to know the dangers of it and to know that it is something that we're in control of and that we can rectify. And so since that inception of MADD in 1980, MADD has been able to decrease national highway traffic deaths due to impaired driving from 25,000 to a little under 10,000 every single year, saving over 400,000 lives and counting. And in addition to that, we really pride ourselves on being an advocacy group there for the families and those who have been impacted. We want to walk with them every step of the way. And since the inception of MADD, we've served over 880,000 families that have been impacted by this 100% preventable crime. And so we're continuing to do the work. We're going to continue to talk about this, our life-saving mission, but we will not stop doing what we're doing until we get down to 0 deaths. And we know that we can get there. And that's why we partner with the likes of Velodyne and other entities to help us take technology to where it's meet technology where it's at, so that we can save more lives on our roadways.
So I want to, and we'll get into that a little bit more, that getting to zero. I've always done a little bit of pushback on that from an autonomous vehicle standpoint. And let me qualify that by saying, we have 30 to 40,000 deaths here in the U.S. Per year caused by automobiles, which is, tragic. It's a big number. And I look at this development of technology trying to get to zero. And I think that's an admirable goal. But I think, I would like to see the more incremental success stories in between. And that's why I'm really pleased talking to you today, Natasha, because your goal of getting to zero isn't of that 40,000, of that 30 to 40,000, but of this, as you say, this crime, this behavior that can be changed. And I do support that goal. So if you've ever heard me say other than, let's not worry about zero, because that is that incremental. Let's start going down on those things that we can work on. The other aspect of that, I'd love you to talk a little bit about, because just, your logo, as it says, no more victims. It isn't always death. It can be injury. It can be substantial injury in that regard, if you want to talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, absolutely. We like to think of, every single DUI, death, and injury doesn't just impact that particular person, right? It's a ripple effect. And as we talk so much about those who have lost their lives, and we continue to, like I say, be the voice for them, there are so many others as well who have been injured by this crime. And so we work with them as well. We walk with them as well. And they're out there too, trying to make a difference once they've physically healed from those injuries. They're out there with us getting their voices heard as well. MADD is a national organization made up of staff, but more importantly, not just our staff, our volunteers are everything. We could not do the work without our volunteers. And a lot of our volunteer makeup is of families who have been impacted, whether their loved one is no longer here, unfortunately, or those who have been injured. And in fact, here in the Bay Area, and I should say in the state of California, we have families who are out there talking and taking on prevention measures to get people to understand their story, how they've been injured, and how not just them and how they've been impacted, but how the ripple effect and how it has impacted their friends, their family, and their loved ones, and to hope that they can resonate their story to others so that they can take the necessary measures not to get behind the wheel intoxicated.
You guys produced I think a really neat video. It's about 3 minutes long. I want to make sure everyone's prepared for that. And let's go ahead and show that. And I think that'll give us some good talking points. Mary, if you've got an opportunity to tee that up, let's show the MADD video that talks a little bit about your initiatives, et cetera.
At MADD, we believe in zero. Zero fathers who aren't there for bedtime. Zero mothers who miss the first day of kindergarten. Zero sons and daughters who never come home. We believe in zero victims of drunk driving. Since MADD's founding, we've made great progress. Drunk driving fatalities declined by more than 50%. All 50 states raised the legal drinking age to 21 and made it illegal for adults to drive with a blood alcohol concentration at or above 0.08. And as of 2016, over half of the country is covered by all offender ignition interlock laws. This is all good news, but it's not good enough. It's not good enough because every year, drunk driving injures 290,000 people. It's not good enough because every year drunk driving takes 10,000 lives. It's not good enough because it isn't zero. But we know that we can get to zero, and it starts with you. When you work with MADD, you're part of the campaign to eliminate drunk driving. The campaign has 4 initiatives. 1, Support more high visibility law enforcement. If people think they'll be caught, they're less likely to drive after drinking. DUI checkpoints can reduce drunk driving deaths by 17% and are one of the strongest deterrents to drunk driving currently available to law enforcement. 2. Ignition interlocks for all convicted drunk drivers. Ignition interlocks force offenders to provide a sober breath sample before operating their vehicles. This keeps drunk drivers off of the road and reduces repeat DUI offenses by 67%. If ignition interlocks were adopted nationwide, an estimated 1,000 additional lives could be saved each year. 3. Advanced vehicle technology. This is the future of a world without drunk driving. The driver alcohol detection system for safety will use breath and/or touch sensors inside the vehicle to determine if a driver is over the BAC limit of 0.08 and keep the car from moving. Additionally, autonomous vehicle technologies have the potential to eliminate many types of roadway fatalities, including drunk driving. If universally adopted, no more victims will become a reality. 4. Public support. Everyone has a responsibility to help eliminate drunk driving. Thanks to non-drinking designated drivers, taxis, public transportation, and ride-sharing apps, there's no excuse to drive drunk. And buckle up every time. Wearing a seatbelt is the best defense against a drunk driver. When you support MADD and the campaign to eliminate drunk driving, your time, your financial support, your energy will all add up to zero. Because we believe in a hug on the first day of school. We believe in another bedtime story. We believe in no more victims. We believe in zero.
Well, I must say, again, congratulations just on the efforts and the successes. I get the chills every time I've seen that, and I've seen it a few times. I love that adds up to zero. A number of things touched on there. They did talk about the injuries. And then also, my gosh, 10,000 deaths still a part of that. So if we say the number's 40,000 and it goes around that, that's 25% of. And for those of us that have been involved or following the development of autonomous vehicles, et cetera, my gosh, that's a big cut right there.
Absolutely, yes. And that's why we at MADD have been very instrumental in wanting to partner with the likes of Velodyne and a few others within the realm of autonomous vehicle technology, because at some point we want to, meet technology for where it's at and not, and be proactive versus reactive and be there on those front lines, because it's not if these, autonomous vehicles become law, it's when they will become law, and that we know that they will rectify human error from those who, not just with impaired driving, but distracted driving and other things that can happen, when people on the roadways, from heart attacks or, mobility issues, things of that nature. It can really change the landscape and rectifying so many other issues alongside impaired driving on our roadways. And so we want to have a seat at the table. We want to be there to input some of our some of our history and our data into there and really put a story behind the technology, right? I think it's important for the community to understand that while Velodyne and so many engineers are working hard to put the safest product out there, we at MADD want to be there to put a story to that product and to let our supporters and let the nation know that this is going to be the new thing in helping us make sure we save lives and keep our roadways safe.
Well, going back to some of the developments over time since the MADD was have been inside the vehicle. There's been safety features, whether it was side impact and airbags, et cetera. And it's important to point out that victims of a drunk driver could be outside the car, but can be passengers, can be part of the the vehicle itself that gets into an accident or runs into an object or something like that. And so there's been some protection offered in that regard. What was disturbing for me is the concept of the repeat offender. That's just really too bad. And you guys are trying to put some additional initiatives or in the vehicle to really take that away.
Absolutely. And so one of those initiatives that we're working on in the state of California at the leadership of our state executive director, Pat Riera, who is housed in LA. and myself under her guidance, we're working on getting an first time all offender interlock ignition device law passed right now as we speak. Right now in the state of California, we have that for that repeat offender, but we really feel that if we can get the behavior modification tool right when we have that first offense, that it can drastically decrease the likelihood of someone re-offending. Because while we have, I want to say there's a stat out there for the state of California, while there is less than 1% of repeat offenders who are driving on our roadways, they attest for about 20% of those who are injuring and killing those on our roadways, right? And so when you think about that number wise, while they're a small fraction of those who are driving on our roadways, they're creating a lot of havoc and danger to those who, like our families, myself and you, Charlie, who are just trying to, get from point A to point B, and they're continue to do those bad behaviors. And so we know that if we, for the first step, we know with the interlock ignition device and having the data across other nations with an first time all offender ignition interlock device law, that can help us right there in our tracks. But we want to take it a step further. And in fact, with our national level, we had a key provision in the Infrastructure and Jobs Act that passed the U.S. Senate on August 10th that will help us and add to it would lead to a new national safety standard requiring of the state-of-the-art smart technology in our car. So that's LiDAR, that's other technology that we talk about in the video that'll take it a step further beyond just the interlock ignition device law and actually have these devices and this technology in cars to save people from themselves.
Well, it's a timely discussion then with that just passing in the last few weeks. And then also, as I'm looking at the video, I see that the kids going back to school, and I know that's rolling out in the different communities right now as that's going on. It's interesting. I mean, it's sad that, again, alcohol abuse, alcoholism is truly a disease. And unfortunately, as you say, there are those that are affected by it that then, unfortunately get behind the wheel and wreak havoc on the rest of us. So it would be nice to somehow be able to put a block in front of those that don't have the control or react so poorly with that. I'm also saddened when I see young kids, again, get behind the wheel. I like the zero tolerance that I know the state of California has, particularly on the young drivers, the below 21. I just, want to caution them always, because I hate to have anything that affects their long term. But, again, at this point, zero tolerance seems to be the best way to prevent anybody from getting hurt or killed.
Absolutely. And so to speak on while we're, we talk about our work with, families who have been impacted, our prevention work. One of the things that we have been doing here in the state of California is we've worked with California's Office Traffic and Safety for many, many years. And they provide great resources for us to be able to provide staff throughout the state of California to go into schools and high schools, middle schools, and talk to teens we talk about the zero tolerance and making sure that they understand and to educate their peers on making those right decisions so that we can save lives. And we do that through our Power of Youth and Power Parent program initiatives. And so we talk to tens of thousands of students every single year. And we just don't talk about, the dangers of drinking and driving. We get them to know the brain development and how that works and how when they start to enter or to utilize drugs and alcohol before a certain age, how it can really rectify the development of the brain and have them making those poor choice making skills that can occur from that. It's a fun, interactive, question and answer based program, like I said, that we do throughout the state of California, because we know that at some point our teens are going to be 21 and they're going to have that legal right to consume alcohol, but we want to make sure that they are educated and well aware and let them know that they're in control and that they have their whole lives ahead of them. And we want to keep them out of harm's way, that we want them to be responsible adults and also not get behind the wheel intoxicated when they're of age to be able to consume alcohol at their choice.
Well, as growing up at one time, being a young man, poor choice-making skills seems to be, unfortunately, one of the first skills you develop in terms of making, and hopefully nobody's ever hurt. And whether it's you're, riding your bike too fast or going places you maybe shouldn't be that are endangered. But it's unfortunate when it affects others and yourself and your family, obviously going forward. I must say, part of this, I want to remind everyone, and you can speak to, my wife and I, through this COVID, have been going back and looking at some of the classic movies and films through time. And the behaviors and the acceptance of certain behaviors, it was part of our culture for a long time, in terms of having that drink or the cocktail or too many, and then getting behind the wheel of a car. So that was certainly something that had to be overcome through the development and growth of MADD.
Absolutely. And once again, I go back to its founding and where it all started with Candy Lightner. I mean, she really changed the trajectory, because you're absolutely right. There was a laxed behavior or thought process in how we thought it was okay as a nation to get behind the wheel intoxicated. There was even commercials back then where, take a couple beers for the road, so to speak. But what people weren't understanding, while that was appealing and it looked like it was okay, lots of lives were being lost. And once again, there's so many things out there that we can't control, but this is one thing that we can control, and that's not get behind the wheel intoxicated. So once again, we go back and pay that homage to Candy and all those volunteers that helped her lead the way, and really getting to understand, getting our communities, our nation, our government officials. I mean, she really pounded that pavement, and getting, our government officials to understand that this is not okay. We have the cure to rectifying drunk driving crashes on our roadways, and let's get this done. And she led the way, which led to all the work that we're doing now today.
So how did that align itself with some of the changes throughout the world? I know that there are other nations that have even stricter tolerances than we have here in the United States. Was it aligned? Was there, talk to me in a global, again, acceptance or not of this type of behavior?
No, absolutely. I think once again, we talk about some of the history and how MADD was founded, and that just kind of went out into other nations. And I know as of late, our latest country to come on board was Brazil and take on this initiative. But you're absolutely right. When you look at other countries and you see some of the work that they're doing, you have to kind of give some of that homage and some of that credit to what Candy and those volunteers started, and how they took what she started and some of their countries and made and took it and had their country officials, or I should say their national officials, really put some tough stipulations so their community can understand that this is a zero tolerance. We're not accepting it, and these are the consequences for those who continue to dabble and get behind the wheel, drinking and driving.
So with that said, and you've had learnings, again, mentioned 4 great initiatives in the video there. One of them, of course, law enforcement. You saw, that talked about changing the age of across the nation in terms of the drinking age, 50% reduction in deaths. Is there any one of those, or is it all of them that you can point to? So when you open up in a new area like Brazil, that you can say, this is the first things you really need to do or get behind?
That's a great question. And so we take each and every one of those initiatives. And I think one of the biggest takeaways from those initiatives is seeing the work that, like I said, in 1980, when MADD was enacted, 25,000 lives were being lost, right? And so then you look at, the initiative that Candy was able to get with President Reagan at the time of changing that drinking age from 18 to 21. You look at the work that she was able to do, not just here in the state of California, but throughout the nation, and getting not just, while she was housed here in California, and not only was she able to get the president at the time, but different states to take on different actions and really get them to focus on the dangers on their roadways and how they can stiffer their laws and their penalties, and make sure people understand that there will be consequences that will have to be had if they choose to make these same poor decisions on driving intoxicated. So some of the advocacy, the decrease in deaths annually across our roadways, and that drinking age has really been some of those key initiatives that we're able to point to when we're talking to other nations or other countries and bringing on the MADD mission and message.
Okay. And then, other changes that happened recently, this development of the shared ride, Uber, Lyft, et cetera. Did that help the cause to a certain extent, getting people back from places in a condition that they shouldn't be driving?
Yes, I couldn't agree more with that. And we work with companies such as Uber and really understanding the importance of rideshare. I can go back to an example of I was at a checkpoint in San Francisco that was hosted some time ago by CHP, the San Francisco office, and I remember them doing a checkpoint. I've been at checkpoints many times before that, but this checkpoint was pretty unique because it really showed us how rideshare is working in our favor and really helping us aid in our message and keeping drunk drivers off the roadways. I would say for every 10 cars that came through that checkpoint, there was about 7 that were rideshare.
Wow.
And I would say out of that half of that 7 had someone, a passenger that they were taking from point A to point B to their destination. And oftentimes we were able to talk to some of those drivers that were driving for Uber or Lyft at that particular time. And they worked those particular, Friday through Sunday night hours because some of them had stories of being impacted by an impaired driver. Some of them were just taking the initiative to make sure that they get people home safe and sound after they've had a great time at night. I mean, out at night, enjoying with their friends and also drinking alcohol, but they wanted to be there to make sure that they did not get behind the wheel and that they had a ride waiting for them after they're finished their activities. And so that was really important and really exciting for us to see and for me to see out there firsthand that Uber and Lyft has really been making an effort in helping us keep drunk drivers off our roadways.
Okay, and then let's just a few statistical questions. So I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, but I made mention of again passenger injury being a part of it. Do you separate? I know it's all terrible and it doesn't matter in the end, but whether somebody was injured or killed in the vehicle, as either the driver or a passenger of a drunk driver versus outside the vehicle, does that make any difference in statistically in your work?
Absolutely not. We try to a victim for us is a victim. And we want to make sure that we provide the same services for anyone who has been impacted by an impaired driver, right? One crash, whether it is an injury or a death, it still rings true to the work that still needs to be done for us. And so we don't like to try to distinguish between the two. Both are just as equally as important. And we want to be able to provide those same services, support for each and every one of those who have been impacted. And sometimes even we go outside of that and maybe there's a family member of someone who has been injured to where the injured victim may not want the services, but that family or that connection to them may want it. And so we try to keep that all into one box. And like I said, injury, death are equally important in the work that we do and that we want to be there for them.
We've tried to stress that both in our, our behavior and then also with our children that are now young adults that, again, don't, there was when the laws were first rolling out and, may have lived through that portion. It was like, oh, I don't want to drive because I'll get in trouble. But maybe the driver shouldn't have been driving either, whose car you were getting into. And then we emphasize that, of course, it doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter how you are not to drive, but also don't get into a vehicle with somebody that shouldn't be driving. And I think that's been growing and added to the peer pressure of all of this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. And to kind of go back to the injury, the injury question, oftentimes we get, and the reason why we want to make sure that we keep that, equally across the board and know that our services are provided for all those impacted, because oftentimes we get injured victims who have survivor's guilt, who feel like, well, since I'm still alive, I don't need the help, or I'm taking up some space from someone who may have lost their life. And so we really want to make sure we make that clear that, whether you want and if you, are able to, heal from those physical wounds, we know that mentally it's going to be a long step in a process for you to get back to wherever that new normal may be. And so that's why we want to make it very important and clear that we're there for both and all those, like I say, in that ripple effect, who have been impacted.
Right. And for those of you that are listening now live, I want to remind you that you can, if you have any questions that you'd like to put forward, I have plenty more and things to talk about with Natasha. But if you want to forward any questions, go ahead and use the Q&A feature of this Zoom call. One of the topics that you mentioned, and it was on our agenda, it was mentioned in the video, and I was just always so proud of, was public support in terms of, again, people start initiatives every now and then, and this one really seemed to get a lot of support. Let's talk about that a little bit.
And which one was that? I'm sorry.
Just public support. It just,
Oh, I'm sorry.
whether it was the word mothers or drunk drivers or deaths and injury, all seemed to resonate with people, and it seemed like the support's been there since the beginning. And let's talk about that and then going forward.
Sorry about that. So yeah, so when it comes to support, once again, I think the writing, is definitely on the wall when we look at the decrease in deaths from 1980 up until now, right? And just the advocacy, the initiative, the moms, the dads, the brothers, the family, the friends who align themselves with MADD to really push not only the community, but our state legislative, our federal legislators, to make a change in our laws to make sure that we understand as a community the dangers of impaired driving. And so once we were able to get a seat at each of those tables, our public, our supporters really understood that we mean business and that we're here to stay until we get down to 0 victims. And so as I talk about us passing, a major key piece in the Infrastructure Bill Act in the Senate on August 10th, to the work we're doing here at the state legislature here in California, to our victims speaking to students, to our staff out there, educating, DUI offenders on, helping them to decrease that recidivism rate. We really put a stamp on how we are supported through the public. And so that's why when we partner with the likes of Velodyne and other entities, one of the things that we really want to do once we do our vetting process and understand that this is something that we stand behind and that we want to support, we want to bring our supporters on board to know that we stand behind this technology, that it's going to take us to that next level in getting to understand that it's going to help us save lives on our roadways. And so we value our public support. We don't take that for granted at all. And that we always want to be transparent and honest with them and where we're at and what we're trying to do, that they stay along with us along the ride and help us continue to bring that number, for what you said, from 25,000 to 10,000 and hopefully one day to 0.
Yeah, that would be great. Talking about working with different initiatives, entities, law enforcement is certainly one. What about first responders? Obviously, they, witness the carnage that this kind of behavior can cause. Is that a good working relationship and helping the growth of MADD?
Absolutely. And so, we talk about the work that we do, in our communities. And really, while we are doing the advocacy work, the prevention work, we cannot, and I stress this enough, we cannot do the work without our first responders, our law enforcement officers, women and men that are out there putting their lives at risk day in, day out to get these drunk drivers off the road. And so without their work, there is no MADD. And so we're pretty much hand in hand in everything that we do. And in fact, we honor our law enforcement here throughout the state of California and across the nation every single year to let them know that we see them, we honor them, and we appreciate the work that they're doing to keep our roadways safe. And so we honor them through what we call our law enforcement recognition event, and where we give them, the awards and the accolades for every arrest that they have taken, every DUI arrest they have made and taking offenders off the street, because what they have initially did is save lives. They've prevented a family from losing, a loved one, a whole family from being injured or killed every time they get that drunk driver off the roadway. And so we make sure that every single year, even through COVID, we've turned our events into a virtual event, but we still are making sure that they're honored and that they're appreciated, because we know while we're out there making the educational and prevention efforts, they're out there, going out and getting those drunk drivers off the roadway. So once again, we do lots of work out there in the community, but we have to take our hats and tip our hats off to our law enforcement and first responders, because they are the first to respond and they do see the carnage on the roadways and understand this very, very serious crime.
And also just wanted to add some of, the ambulatory services, the emergency,
Yes.
respondents also. You talked about empowered in driving. Obviously, in some states now, of course, marijuana is legal. You talk about, again, dropping the alcohol down to 0.08. I know one of the challenges in terms of measuring impaired driving is, with marijuana usage is, whether it can be measured or not. Let's talk a little bit about going forward with other forms of some substance that might impair someone's driving and the work you might be doing in that area.
Absolutely. So, we like to think impairment is impairment, right? And I had the opportunity, I want to say in 2018, to work with CHP Golden Gate Division here in the Bay Area, where we put together and co-hosted a marijuana summit. And one of those things that we really talked about was that this is going to be, no different than what we do in education and prevention wise when it comes to alcohol and being drunk behind the wheel. And so we all came together, myself, my staff, and about 200 officers in that room to talk about the new marijuana law that's here, that was enacted here in California, and to make sure that we're on the front line and being proactive to educate the community that while it may be, the law for you to consume marijuana, it is against the law to get behind the wheel. And so we're just taking our same actions, message, and mission and innovating them and revamping them to get them out into the community to understand that, impairment is impairment, whether it be marijuana, whether it be alcohol, whether it be prescription drugs. You cannot get behind the wheel intoxicated at all.
Yeah. And so let's talk about going forward, initiatives that you might have. Is there anything that you want to share with everyone? I know you have an event coming up we might want to go over and some other things. Yeah, there's Mary showing us the screen right now. Thanks, Mary.
So speaking of which, we every year, in addition to some of the other initiatives I've talked about with the law enforcement recognition event that we have every year, we also have what we call our Walk Like MADD event. And we'll be hosting one safely outdoors here in the Bay Area on Sunday, October 3rd, where law enforcement, our partners, such as Velodyne and others, and more importantly, our victims and our families come together to walk and honor those who are no longer with us and those who have been injured due to this 100% preventable crime. So we all collectively come together. It is a moment of honoring, but a moment of excitement and power that we know that we have in the community to make sure that we continue to do the work that we do to get our numbers down to zero. And so while we hold one here just in Northern California, for those who may be on the call who are in our Southern California area, you can join my supervisor and her team, the state executive director, Pat Riera, and you can find walks across the nation. So we have one in Sacramento, like I said, we have one in the Bay Area, we have one in Fresno, Bakersfield, the Inland Empire, LA, San Diego, you name it, we have them all throughout the state. And if you are, like I said, if you're not in my area and can attend our walk on October 3rd, please go to www.walklikemadd.org. Type in your local city where you reside, and a walk will come up here in the state of California. And if you're able to make it or support, whether it be starting a team or any other support, volunteering, you can definitely do so by once again going to www.walklikemadd.org and typing in your city's name and finding your local event. But if you need some more information, I know that after the end of this webinar, my email will be up, and I'll be more than happy. You can send me an email, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions or direct you to that particular area that you may be in hopes that you can come out and support us this year.
Yeah, there's a lot of information on the screen, or if you're driving and you can't see it, I want you to know that, again, there's always the opportunity to connect with Natasha directly. And then the opportunity, of course, you can always contact us here at Velodyne, and we can forward the information. So you can take that off now, Mary. Did get a question about using medical grade single-use breathalyzers in bars and restaurants as a line of defense to compel them to consume alcohol or understand the risk and encourage them to make better decisions, before they even leave that type of an institution.
So for us, when it comes down to breathalyzers, we do not, I want to say support, but one of our biggest deterrent is that, those are not 100% sure deterrents in making sure that you're not intoxicated behind, as you leave that bar and get behind the wheel. So we like to say, if you're going out and you either make a plan, if you know you're going to consume alcohol, so either make a plan where if you can get an Uber or a Lyft, but if you're driving, we definitely say, please drive sober, right? That, that one drink or two drinks after that, you're taking the risk and taking the chance of getting behind the wheel intoxicated. And while we know there's technology out there for breathalyzers that, some bars and restaurants may have, or you may personally use, we still don't think they're 100% effective in keeping you out of harm's way. So we say that, make that plan ahead. If you know you're going to consume alcohol, to get an Uber, get a Lyft. But if you want to drive yourself and you're going out, to just drive sober, to not take one drink at all.
Yeah, and again, let's point out that there are people that run into friends or something like that, didn't really do a lot of plan ahead, and so I guess the question is it prudent to try and use the same breathalyzer that the law enforcement might use to give you an idea, or to your point, one or two drinks. I guess we could both agree that somebody or even your own self with one or two drinks are going to be different in part, whether you're impaired, whether you're tired or taking other medications, things like that.
I would definitely, once again, going back to my first, statement on that. When we talk about, well, like I said, technology has increased and grown tremendously. The breathalyzers that we may have ourselves will not be equated to those that the law enforcement have, because those are calibrated often, maintenance audits to the ones that, compared to the ones that we may be able to buy or that a restaurant or a bar may have. So once again, I just go back to, if you're going to be behind the wheel, or that you're going to drive, do not take a drink at all, and I always tell people, we talk to DUI offenders every single year through our victim impact panel classes. And we've heard so many stories of those who have gotten a DUI that they thought they can make it home, or they used one of those, breathalyzers they were able to purchase, and they still were intoxicated and their BAC was over 0.08. So once again, don't take the risk, don't take the chances. So many of them say, had I known better, or had I listened to my first mind, I would have just left my car, paid $100 Uber ride to get home, and had, come back and get my car, versus having to be convicted and have to go through all these steps and pay these fees and fines. But more importantly, I could have injured or killed somebody on those roadways.
Right. That's an important thing to finish with. Yes, as inconvenient as it is for that, if somebody had actually gotten hurt later in the drive or something like that, including yourself, it's really too bad. I had I don't know, my behavior was always based on the fact that in my career, I used to test drive a lot of vehicles. So there was a zero tolerance. And so I've been able to, because I'm driving another vehicle or something like that, just that behavior. And it's not easy. It's not easy to do. So I certainly recognize that. And again, we friends or socialization, that type of thing. So again, as one of our viewers is pointing out, education and awareness is the key to make better decisions. So
absolutely. And we've seen so many walks of life, take that risk, and they've made it out of harm's way, meaning they didn't injure or kill anyone, but they've lost, so many things behind that poor decision that they made. And so once again, we just want people to be educated, make it aware, and make sure they make those sound and life-saving choices if they decide to go out and consume alcohol.
Just trying to spin a silver lining on a dark cloud, COVID. Did you see a drop in deaths? And obviously people just weren't going out or socializing. Was that something measurable from your point of view?
That's a great question. And in fact, as we across the nation, and being shuttered in and being on lockdown, National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration noticed in 2020 that we had we decreased our driving miles across the nation by 430 billion miles, were a decrease due to the shutdowns and the lockdowns. But unfortunately, we saw a 9% increase in DUI fatalities. So there, while we thought, that we would see a decrease because there was not many of us driving back to work, bars and restaurants were closed. But we did see a 9% increase in fatalities, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
And so it's just that, once again, that prevention work and measures that we continue to need to do.
It's a statement of broad behavior changes in the way this COVID, or how we react to, being in the quarantine or not, and socializing or not. It is unfortunate. And the other unfortunate thing I know is we're rolling out of this or not, depending on how Delta is doing where you are. Uber or Lyft, the shared rides have been somewhat inconsistent in reappearing in terms of their prolific availability. I've seen a lot of times in places where there isn't availability, and my gosh, unfortunately, they've put taxis out of business in some towns. So I guess we need to let that grow back into the pre-pandemic numbers, so that we can, again, behave accordingly, make sure that it requires perhaps a little bit more pre-planning on our part before we socialize.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as I tell, anyone that I'm talking to, there's no excuses, when we talk about, even though, with the disruption of Uber drivers and things of that nature due to COVID right now, but there's no excuses for us to have to deal with impaired driving on our roadways. And I think we as individuals, with all these options and all these measures that are out there for us to deter us getting behind the wheel intoxicated, whether it, like I said, be alcohol, drugs, or prescription drugs, we have to take the onus and be responsible for ourselves, which will equate to us being responsible for one another. And so, there's that drink that you may want to have when you're out and you need to get home may not be worth it when you know that you can really change your life and so many others. And so once again, it just goes back to us being responsible for ourselves, which will equate to us being responsible for one another.
Those are great closing comments. And unfortunately, we are out of time, Natasha. It really flew by. For those of you that are watching, if we didn't get to your question, or you're watching it on the YouTube and didn't get a chance to offer a question, here's Natasha's email contact information, or you can send a note to here, webinars@velodyne.com. So you can reach out directly. Again, this webinar is recorded. It's available to view on the YouTube channel. If you'd like to share the information that MADD is putting forth, please share the video, the link to that, and let others see that. I want to thank Natasha again and MADD for joining us today. And thank all of you that are watching now and later on for spending time with us. Just a reminder, I made mention early on of the World Safety Summit. I will again have the good fortune of being the MC of this event. It will be a virtual summit again this year. Unfortunately, we're not able to confidently meet in person with the changes going on, but that's not to say we won't have some great information to share. Put it down for November 2nd. It'll be a several-hour, most of the day event, and we look forward to everyone having the opportunity to join us there. Look forward for upcoming episodes of Velodyne Lidar Live, and if you're signed up, you'll get the more information on that also. Thanks again, everyone, for being here. Thanks, Natasha, Thomas, MADD, for being a part of this, and everyone drive safely and smartly, and look out for everyone else out there. Bye now.
Awesome. Thank you.